All right, guys, if you love college football, you're definitely going to love this weekend's game. Auburn taking on Georgia. Number 5, Georgia. Number 13, Auburn in the Deep South. Oldest rivalry, arguably one of the more exciting games in the SEC every single year. The game is definitely going to be won in the trenches between these two, both on both sides of the football. Offensive line, defensive line on both sides of the football are going to control the narrative of this particular football game. Now, when I think about last year, I think about, everything was kind of stalemated, and then Georgia began to impose their will on Auburn later on in that particular football game. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger. I think the Auburn fans are asked to wear blue this week. So if you are going to the game, you might want to check that out. But I caught wind of Auburn fans being asked to wear blue this week for the Deep South's oldest rivalry that will welcome one of the top defenses in the country statistically. And then that leads me to the idea of how will Auburn respond in this particular football game. Their offensive line has been really, really inconsistent at best. Quarterback play has been errant at times. I don't think there is any kind of cohesion between the quarterback and the offensive line, somewhat of a lack of trust there. I was actually looking at Joe Burrow as, I was looking at replay on Alabama and LSU, looking at Joe Burrow and how calm he is in, under pressure. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, LSU doesn't give him any more protection per se than Auburn's, once Auburn gets out of the unforced errors and can actually get the ball snapped and, get the play progression going. Joe Burrow is very calm and he's very observant under pressure. He's very calculated in how he likes to scramble. Very rarely will you see a Joe Burrow scramble that doesn't amount to anything. I think that's something from a film study standpoint that Bo Nix probably needs to look at, because when he scrambles, it's really non-productive. Either he's going to throw the ball away, or he's going to take a sack or make a very errant pass and throw an interception. I think he bails on plays too quick. We've talked about this many times, but Joe Burrow really kind of sets the tone because, when you look at even, say, Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon Johnson was struggling a little bit as a running back for Auburn, plagued with injuries and all those other things. And then, he started to kind of look like Le'Veon Bell. I don't know if he actually studied film on him, but it was still, you could tell that there was an obvious change in technique for Kerryon Johnson, and it paid off, and now he's playing in the NFL. Bo Nix, a very young quarterback, very inexperienced, does need to start looking at, if he's not doing it already, starting to kind of mimic his game based on what other quarterbacks are doing pretty successfully. Kind of like you think about Kobe Bryant and the way he mimicked his game seemingly based on Michael Jordan, and it kind of worked. I think Bo Nix is at a point where he could utilize that film mentorship, so to speak, to really learn the pace of the game, because Alabama was coming at Joe Burrow full speed, full steam. Their defensive ends were crashing, and they were putting a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow had the presence of mind to make his scrambling, to make his pocket presence. He steps up into the pocket and makes the throws, has the vision downfield, and that all goes with experience and trust. I think Bo Nix is going to have to find a way to become that leader he has to begin to make things happen. It's his time. This is the game that he has to at least not be a liability for his team. Because if you talk about a Bo Nix, errant and, just out of sorts the way he was against Florida, seemed to kind of be a little bit more calm against LSU. Didn't make quite as many mistakes. I was actually somewhat encouraged by some of the things that he was able to do in the LSU game. Didn't completely embarrass himself, but the unforced errors really put Bo Nix and the offense, period, not just Bo Nix, but just the offense, period, in very, very compromised positions against a very good defense in LSU. And also, I think, looking at the Ole Miss game, I think Auburn saw some things that could possibly be beneficial against Georgia. I really like them targeting J.J. Wilson. So that could be a cool factor in this particular game. But looking at the offensive line and the future of the offensive line, Auburn has done a very, very huge deal here in this offseason with recruiting, not only recruiting offensive linemen out of high school, but they understand the urgency to get some experience in here next year because this offensive line is gone starting next year. So much so that out of the 7 offensive linemen that Auburn has recruited over the course of this recruiting class, you got 3 of them who are junior college transfers. What does that mean? That means they bring experience to the table. They're probably going to be more quick to develop and possibly fight for a starting spot, because that's going to be a a huge crucial piece for this particular football team to be able to establish the line of scrimmage offensively. And losing all of your starters and basically depending on the class of 2019 is really not going to be a good move coming into this season. So I think Auburn did a very good service to themselves by going out and getting some of these recruits, especially Brendan Coffey, the latest offensive lineman recruit. He's 6'6", 275 pounds. Now, I don't think that's big enough, but obviously, you get into Power 5 football, the diets change, the workout regimens change, the level of definitely changes to where, he probably will be obviously in the position to be a viable offensive lineman for the Auburn Tigers on next year. And definitely Auburn will have a little time to figure it out next year because Auburn, compared to recent times, Auburn has a relatively favorable schedule. Talk about opening up against Alcorn State out of the SWAC, FCS school out of the SWAC conference. I think that school is out in Mississippi. They're going to be welcoming them to Jordan Hare Stadium, first game of the year to give some time to, really get the offense together. And also, you don't have such a high consequence game like the Oregon game that you had last year, where you're basically putting yourself out there to begin the season. But getting into a really nice rhythm as far as recruiting of what you need. I think also Auburn just picked up a defensive end in Jay Hardy, but also I think they need one more defensive lineman in this recruiting class, like we said before, to give some level of continuity to continue to repeat. You don't want to put yourself in the position that the current offensive line is, because that's all recruiting. All recruiting. Bo Nix having to start as a true freshman quarterback is all recruiting. It's really unnecessary because out of all the recruiting classes and all the quarterbacks that were recruited here in the past few years, there's no reason that Bo Nix should have been forced to start on this year. And then having to do the pop fly and try to pick up Kelly Bryant just wasn't a really good move. Hopefully the Auburn coaching staff, especially on the offensive side of the football field, have learned moving forward that you got to recruit, and you have to strategically recruit. You look at teams like Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Those guys they have a prototype of player that they like to recruit. If you look at Auburn, it just seems like very sporadic, seems like all over the place. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.